I thought everything was fine and dandy. I had no clue that I was now having something else in me that was illegal.
Jon Jones soared to the top as a UFC legend, widely praised for his unbelievable skill and fearless dominance inside the cage. But beneath all that glory, he had no idea that his own hidden choices were actually the very things that would eventually destroy his career and shatter the incredible life he had built. Let me break down this epic rise and fall of a champion for you. It all started on July 19, 1987, when a child was born in Rochester, New York, who was truly destined to become one of the most dominant forces mixed martial arts had ever seen. Jonathan Dwight Jones grew up in a world that seemed to naturally forge champions, with a pastor father known for his unwavering discipline, a mother of remarkable strength and determination, and two brothers who would both go on to carve their own paths to glory in the National Football League. Growing up, young John constantly found himself measuring up to impossibly high standards. His brother Arthur would famously win a Super Bowl with the Baltimore Ravens, while Chandler would establish his own hugely successful NFL career. The pressure to excel wasn't just external, it was deeply woven into the very fabric of their family's identity. Yet even with this shining veneer of achievement and success, a profound darkness lurked beneath, just waiting for its moment to emerge and consume absolutely everything in its path.
In order to paint a bright future for yourself, you have to be able to see it in your mind. You have to believe in it, and the more you believe in it, the more your world will start to change, and the more you'll just start to, see your beliefs come to pass. So, answer your question, just self-belief.
The Jones family actually endured profound hardship when John's sister Carmen tragically died from brain cancer at just 18 years old. This devastating loss would cast a long, heavy shadow over John's entire life, a deep trauma that he would later directly connect to his very public struggles with substance abuse. But before all the controversies, before the arrests, before the failed drug tests, and the public disgrace, there was simply this raw, undeniable talent. Jon Jones walked into mixed martial arts with a natural gift that seemed almost supernatural. His incredible reach, his impeccable timing, his uncanny ability to read opponents and then dismantle them with calculated, almost surgical precision, these weren't just skills that could be taught. They were innate, almost preternatural abilities that truly separated him from virtually every other fighter who ever stepped into the octagon. Then on March 19, 2011, at just 23 years old, Jon Jones defeated Mauricio Shogun Rua to capture the UFC light heavyweight championship, instantly becoming the youngest champion in the promotion's entire history. The fight wasn't even close. It was a systematic destruction, a masterclass in violence that loudly announced to the world that a new king had arrived. Rua, a legendary fighter in his own right, was made to look ordinary, even pedestrian, against this young phenom who seemed to operate on a completely different plane of existence. What followed was an absolutely unprecedented reign of dominance that the light heavyweight division had never witnessed before. Jones didn't just defeat opponents, he dismantled them, humiliated them, made them question whether they even belonged in the same cage with him. Daniel Cormier, Alexander Gustafsson, Quinton Rampage Jackson, Lyoto Machida, Rashad Evans, Vitor Belfort, Chael Sonnen, these were names that struck fear into the hearts of other fighters, but they became mere footnotes in the Jon Jones story. Victims added to a resume that seemed destined for immortality. His 2013 fight against Alexander Gustafsson would eventually be inducted into the UFC Hall of Fame, a brutal back-and-forth war that pushed Jones to his absolute limits and for a brief moment, revealed vulnerabilities that few knew even existed.
Look forward to seeing you again. You are still the champion.
God bless you all. Thank you so much for coming out. Team Jones, we're still here, baby. It's a beautiful night for me. Beautiful night.
The champion, Jon Jones, ladies and gentlemen.
But here's the thing. Even in that brutal fight against Gustafsson, where he was truly taken to the brink of defeat, Jones still found a way to win, to survive, to emerge victorious, when lesser fighters would have absolutely crumbled under the immense pressure. Yet, even as Jones was cementing his place as perhaps the greatest fighter of all time, the very seeds of his destruction were already being sown. He would later openly admit to heavy partying before major fights like the Gustafsson bout, confessing that he felt he didn't even deserve to win because of how poorly he had prepared. This wasn't just a champion battling a substance abuse problem. This was a man actively sabotaging his own greatness, undermining his own legacy, even as he was simultaneously building it. The first major public crack in his flawless facade came on December 5, when Jones tested positive for benzoylecgonine, a cocaine metabolite, during a random out-of-competition drug test administered by the Nevada State Athletic Commission right before his highly anticipated UFC 8T2 title defense against Daniel Cormier. The crazy part, the substance wasn't actually banned out of competition at the time, so technically Jones faced no suspension for the fight, which he went on to win by unanimous decision.
If you look at the drug testing, they're finding M3 metabolite, which is a long-term metabolite. What I've heard recently is that this metabolite can live in you for up to 7 years. And the science on this is still fairly weak. I mean, right now, a lot of people are a little fan. A lot of people are learning about it through my situation.
On January 6, 2015, Jones announced he had voluntarily checked into a drug treatment facility, and UFC CEO Lorenzo Fertitta and President Dana White publicly issued statements of support, with White even noting he was proud of Jon Jones for making that decision. For a brief moment, it truly seemed that perhaps Jones was taking responsibility, that he was ready to confront his issues head-on and emerge stronger, better, and more focused than ever before. But reports very quickly emerged that his stay lasted only one night. His mother, Camille Jones, later confirmed this in an interview, stating she was glad it happened to Jon because it served as a wake-up call, though she didn't elaborate on why he left so quickly. Critics, including Yahoo Sports' Kevin Eel, quickly called the brief stint a charade, suggesting it was more for public relations than genuine treatment. The narrative was already starting to take shape. This wasn't a champion committed to change, but rather a troubled star more concerned with image management than actual rehabilitation. In a January 2015 interview, Jones denied having a cocaine addiction, describing his use as merely recreational, and emphasized personal responsibility, saying, "I definitely don't have an excuse. I did it. I had a party." Regarding rehab, he explained that after evaluation by 3 doctors, he was recommended for outpatient counseling instead of inpatient treatment, committing to weekly drug testing and counseling sessions twice a week. Jones also reflected philosophically, noting he wouldn't vow to never drink or party again, but aimed to learn from his mistakes, saying, "The important thing is to learn when we fall down to get back up." Then came April 27, 2015, the incident that would fundamentally alter the trajectory of Jones's career and life forever. Jones fled the scene after crashing into a pregnant woman's car in Albuquerque, brazenly leaving cash and a marijuana pipe behind. He turned himself in later, but the damage was absolutely catastrophic. This wasn't just a positive drug test or a DUI, this was a hit-and-run involving a pregnant woman, an act of sheer cowardice that revealed a man more concerned with self-preservation than the welfare of others, even the innocent victims of his recklessness. The incident ultimately resulted in probation and, critically, Jones's first UFC title stripping. The youngest champion in UFC history, the man who seemed destined to break every record the sport had to offer, was suddenly stripped of his crown, his reputation in tatters, and his future incredibly uncertain. Nike, one of his major sponsors, dropped him immediately, with other endorsements quickly following suit. The financial cost was staggering, but the cost to his legacy, to his reputation, to his very identity as a fighter and as a man, that was incalculable. As 2015 gave way to 2016, Jones attempted a comeback, posting on social media about his sobriety milestone. In June 2016, he celebrated 9 months sober. In September 2016, he posted about being over a year completely clean and sober, and by November 2016, he described himself as clean, sober, and grateful for his life and career. These posts painted a picture of a man in recovery, a champion seemingly reclaiming his life and career from the abyss of addiction. But in April 2016, Jones made a stunning admission in an interview, openly stating that he was a drug addict, using the past. He clarified that his issues extended beyond cocaine to marijuana, which he used habitually between fights, before eating, training, sleeping, and other activities. He described himself as a hippie during those periods, using it to cope with life stresses, but noted he had shifted to a clean, Spartan lifestyle for his career comeback. This admission was remarkable in its honesty, but it also revealed the true depth of Jones's substance issue. This wasn't occasional recreational use, but rather a pervasive dependence that touched every aspect of his daily life. Then, just days before UFC 2000, Jones was dramatically pulled from the event after testing positive for clomiphene and letrozole, estrogen blockers often used post-steroid cycles. The fight was cancelled, and Jones received a 1-year suspension. The comeback was dead before it even began. Once again, at the very moment when Jones seemed poised to resurrect his career, he had sabotaged himself, destroying his own opportunities through choices that defied comprehension. But Jones wasn't finished fighting. He served his suspension, returned to the octagon, and on July 29, 2017, knocked out Daniel Cormier at UFC 2 in what appeared to be a triumphant return, a definitive statement that Jon Jones was back and better than ever. The knockout was brutal, decisive, leaving no doubt about who was the better fighter. Jones had reclaimed his title, vanquished his greatest rival, and seemed poised to begin a new chapter of dominance. Yet the shadow of doubt lingered. Jones tested positive for performance-enhancing drugs 3 times total, clomiphene and letrozole, Combined with his 2014 cocaine test, Jones had failed 4 drug tests in total, a staggering number for any athlete, let alone one claiming to be the greatest of all time. Critics began to dismiss him from GOAT discussions entirely, arguing that his accomplishments were tainted, that his dominance was chemically enhanced, and that comparing him to clean fighters like Georges St. Pierre or Demetrius Johnson was an insult to those who had achieved greatness, without pharmaceutical assistance. The personal toll was mounting alongside the professional consequence. In June 2017, Jones's mother, Camille, passed away at age 55 after a long battle with diabetes. This loss followed the earlier death of his sister Carmen from brain cancer. Jones has directly connected these traumas to his substance issues, describing rehab as a trauma center for addressing underlying pain. In a 2018 interview, he reflected on lessons from his 2015 rehab experience, learning how life's traumas can lead to substance abuse, suggesting it helped him understand his patterns amid family hardship. Just weeks after his mother's death, came the positive test for turinabol following UFC. The timing was devastating. Here was a man dealing with profound grief, only to compound his pain through choices that would cost him everything he had just reclaimed.
Feel the same way?
Yeah, you can never promise anything in life. You never know. You just never know what twists and turns life's going to throw at you. But I do feel like I'm on a great track, and I'm just excited to just continue to elevate and just be the best person that I can be and try to help as many people as I can help.
The legal troubles continued to mount alongside the doping violations. Jones was arrested for DUI in 2012, after crashing his Bentley into a pole in Binghamton, New York. In 2019, he was charged with battery after an incident with a cocktail waitress at a strip club. In 2020, he was arrested for aggravated DWI, negligent use of a firearm, and possession of an open container after being found intoxicated in his car with a gun. Through all of this chaos, Jones continued to fight, continued to win, and continued to demonstrate that inside the octagon at least, he remained virtually unbeatable. But the questions persisted, growing louder with each passing controversy. How much of his success was natural talent? And how much was pharmaceutical enhancement? Could his accomplishments truly be celebrated when they were achieved by someone so repeatedly, so consistently unwilling to follow the rules that governed everyone else? The spiral deepens. September 24, 2021 should have been one of the proudest moments of Jon Jones's life. His induction into the UFC Hall of Fame for his legendary 2013 battle with Alexander Gustafsson. The fight had been a war, a brutal back-and-forth contest that had pushed Jones to his absolute limits and had given fans one of the most memorable battles in light heavyweight history. The Hall of Fame recognition was well-deserved, an acknowledgement of Jones's undeniable contributions to the sport, despite all his controversies. But just hours after the ceremony, Jones was arrested in Las Vegas for domestic battery and tampering with a vehicle after an altercation with his fiancée. The charges were later reduced, but the damage to his reputation was severe and immediate. Here was a man who couldn't even make it through a single night of celebration without self-destructing, who couldn't accept an honor recognizing his achievements without immediately tarnishing that moment with violence and recklessness. The domestic battery arrest was particularly troubling because it represented a pattern of behavior that extended beyond Jones's struggles with substances or performance-enhancing drugs. This was violence directed at someone he supposedly loved, at the mother of his children, revealing a darkness that went deeper than addiction or poor judgment. This was a fundamental character flaw, a capacity for harm that substance abuse might exacerbate, but certainly didn't create. The incident prompted yet another public recommitment to sobriety from Jones. In November 2021, he posted a Bible verse and shared that he had reached 60 days sober and counting, crediting divine intervention for sparing his family, life, and career. Once again, Jones was making promises, once again claiming transformation, once again asking the world to believe that this time would be different, that he had finally learned his lesson and was committed to lasting change. His fights against Thiago Santos in July 2019 and Dominic Reyes in February 2020 generated significant controversy, with many observers believing Jones had lost both bouts, despite being awarded split and unanimous decisions respectively. These close, disputed victories suggested that Jones might finally be declining, that the combination of age and inactivity due to suspensions and years of substance abuse were finally catching up with his once supernatural abilities. The Reyes fight was particularly contentious. Dominic Reyes, a young, hungry challenger, appeared to many observers to have outworked Jones through the first 3 rounds, landing more significant strikes and controlling the pace of the fight. But when the scorecards were read, Jones miraculously retained his title by unanimous decision, with all 3 judges awarding him the victory. The decision was immediately controversial, with fans, media members, and even some fighters expressing disbelief at the outcome. Accusations of eye-poking, a recurring issue throughout Jones's career, further complicated the perception of these fights. Jones's distinctive fighting stance, with his fingers extended toward his opponent's faces, had long been a source of controversy. Critics argued that Jones used eye pokes as a deliberate tactic to impair his opponent's vision and create openings for his strikes. While eye pokes are technically illegal, referees often failed to deduct points or take meaningful action, allowing Jones to continue using the tactic with minimal consequence. After the Reyes fight, Jones vacated the light heavyweight title and announced his intention to move up to heavyweight, a division where he would face larger, more powerful opponents. The move was presented as a new challenge, a chance for Jones to prove his greatness in a different weight class and potentially cement his legacy as the greatest fighter of all time by holding titles in 2 divisions. But the heavyweight transition would take years to materialize, years during which Jones remained largely inactive, citing the need to bulk up properly and prepare his body for the increased size and power of heavyweight opponents. During this extended layoff, questions naturally emerged about Jones's true motivations. Was this really about preparing properly for heavyweight competition, or was Jones simply avoiding dangerous matchups at light heavyweight while waiting for more favorable opportunities at heavyweight? The years 2020 and 2021 brought even more legal troubles, including a 2020 aggravated DWI arrest with firearm-related charges, the 2021 domestic battery incident, and charges related to police vehicle tampering that resulted in a fine and an anger management order. Each new arrest simply added to a criminal record that was becoming harder and harder to reconcile with Jones's persistent claims of personal growth and transformation. By this point, Jones had been arrested at least 6 times for various offenses, a staggering number for someone who supposedly understood the stakes and consequences of his actions. By 2023, Jones appeared more genuinely focused on sobriety, posting on social media about fun without drinking, and embracing sober living. This renewed commitment seemed more authentic than previous attempts, possibly because Jones was finally preparing for his long-delayed heavyweight debut and understood that another major controversy could genuinely end his career entirely.
The UFC had shown remarkable patience with Jones over the years, standing by him through multiple suspensions and arrests, but even that patience, it seemed, had its limits. Then, on March 4, 2023, Jon Jones finally made his highly anticipated heavyweight debut at UFC 235, facing Cyril Gane for the vacant heavyweight championship. The fight was notable not just for Jones's move to a completely new weight class,
but also for the simple fact that he was actually competing again after years of inactivity and constant controversy. Gane was rightly considered one of the top heavyweights in the world, a skilled striker with excellent movement and impressive technical ability. But get this, Jones won the fight by first-round submission, applying a devastating guillotine choke that forced Gane to tap out just over 2 minutes into the bout. It was an absolutely stunning performance, demonstrating that even after years away from competition, and even after all the controversies and substance abuse, Jones still possessed elite-level skills and the undeniable ability to compete at the very highest level. This victory made Jones the heavyweight champion, and on the surface, seemed to completely vindicate his decision to move up in weight. But even this triumph was quickly complicated by fresh controversy and criticism. Many observers noted that Jones had conspicuously avoided a matchup with Francis Ngannou, the former heavyweight champion, who had been universally considered the most dangerous fighter in the division. Ngannou had actually left the UFC in a contract dispute before Jones's heavyweight debut, and some quickly accused Jones of deliberately waiting for Ngannou's departure before moving up to heavyweight, thus conveniently avoiding the most dangerous possible matchup. The accusations of ducking dangerous opponents would continue throughout Jones's heavyweight run. After winning the title, Jones chose to defend it against Stipe Miocic, a former heavyweight champion, but one who was 42 years old and hadn't competed in years. Meanwhile, Tom Aspinall had won the interim heavyweight championship and was the clear #1 contender. But Jones repeatedly refused to commit to fighting him. Aspinall actually held the interim title longer during Jones's injury hiatus than many champions hold undisputed titles, yet Jones showed absolutely no interest in unifying the titles or defending against the younger, more dangerous challenger. Instead, he stubbornly insisted on the Miocic fight, which many viewed as a carefully selected matchup against an aging opponent rather than a genuine defense against the best available challenger. The criticism heavily suggested that Jones, despite all his confident talk of being the greatest of all time, was actually cherry-picking opponents and actively avoiding risky fights. Then, on November 16, 2024, Jones successfully defended his heavyweight title against Stipe Miocic at UFC 309, winning by third-round TKO. Miocic, at 42 years old and coming off a 3-year layoff, offered little resistance, and Jones dominated the fight from start to finish. The victory was impressive from a technical standpoint, but it did little to silence critics who argued that Jones had deliberately chosen an aging, inactive opponent rather than facing the legitimate #1 contender in Tom Aspinall. In December 2024, during post-fight reflections, Jones became visibly emotional, remembering his mother, underscoring how family traumas continued to shape his journey even years after her passing. This rare moment of vulnerability revealed that beneath all the bravado and confidence, Jones remained a deeply wounded man, still processing losses that had occurred years earlier, still struggling with grief that he had never properly addressed. Then came October 3, 2025, when tragedy struck the Jones family once again. Jones's older brother, Arthur Jones III, died suddenly at age 39 from a pre-existing heart condition in Syracuse, New York. Arthur's pacemaker alerted emergency services, but he had already passed by the time they arrived. John released an incredibly emotional tribute video, describing Arthur as a gentle giant, a Super Bowl champion, a devoted father, spouse, and community figure who loved outdoor activities like hunting and fishing. He emphasized Arthur's kindness, generosity, and lasting legacy, vowing that the family, including their father Arthur Jr., brother Chandler, and Arthur IV, would move forward in his honor. Jones wrote, "Most came, King Arthur will truly be missed. He's gone way too soon, but his spirit will live on in our hearts forever." The profound tragedy of Jon Jones wasn't just that he had failed to maximize his immense potential. It was that he seemed tragically incapable of understanding or accepting responsibility for his failures, utterly unable to break patterns that were clearly destroying his life and legacy. And as the world watched, waiting to see if the devastating loss of his brother would finally be the catalyst for lasting change, one question loomed larger than all others. Was redemption still truly possible for Jon Jones, or had he already crossed a point of no return? This was the bitter. Following his victory over Stipe Miocic in November 2024, the pressure on Jon Jones to face Tom Aspinall intensified dramatically. Aspinall, the interim heavyweight champion, represented everything that made that fight so compelling: youth, explosive speed, devastating knockout power, and an unquenchable hunger. At 31 years old, Aspinall was squarely in his athletic prime, while Jones was approaching 38, an age when even the greatest fighters typically start showing clear signs of decline. But Jones showed absolutely no interest in the matchup that the entire mixed martial arts world was desperately wanting to see. Instead, he repeatedly expressed a clear preference for what he called legacy fights against older, more famous opponents, effectively dismissing Aspinall, despite the younger fighter having held the interim title for an extended period. This blatant refusal to engage with the obvious #1 contender was seen by many as the ultimate proof that Jones, despite all his talk of being the greatest of all time, was ultimately unwilling to take the hardest available challenge. Critics quickly pointed out that Aspinall had held the interim heavyweight title longer during Jones's injury absence than many fighters held undisputed championships, yet Jones treated him as utterly unworthy of consideration. The disrespect was blatant, the cherry-picking obvious, and the damage to Jones's legacy was significant. Here was a man who claimed to want to be remembered as the greatest fighter ever, yet who seemed terrified of facing a challenger who represented a genuine threat to his status. And the pattern of avoidance extended beyond Aspinall. Throughout his career, Jones had faced persistent accusations of ducking certain opponents or timing his moves to conveniently avoid the most dangerous challenges. The most glaring example was, of course, Francis Ngannou. Jones's move to heavyweight came suspiciously conveniently after Ngannou's departure from the UFC, allowing Jones to capture the heavyweight title without ever having to face, arguably, the most fearsome puncher the division had ever seen. The legal record, honestly, told its own damning story. Beyond the DUI in 2012, the hit-and-run in 2015, and the various substance-related arrests, Jones faced a 2019 battery charge at a casino, a 2020 aggravated DUI, with firearm-related charges, a 2021 domestic battery, which was later dropped, and police vehicle tampering, resulting in a fine and an anger management order. And then in 2024, allegations of assaulting a drug testing agent, pleading not guilty but still accepting another anger management order. Each incident painted a clearer picture of a man unable or unwilling to control his impulses. Someone for whom normal societal rules seemed simply not to apply. The anger management orders, in particular, strongly suggested deep-seated issues with emotional regulation and conflict resolution, problems that went far beyond substance abuse into the realm of fundamental personality and behavioral disorders. Jones had admitted to heavy partying, including before major fights like the one against Gustafsson, where he felt he didn't even deserve to win. Public disputes with fighters, officials, and even police compounded his image as a bad guy trying to be good, except the trying part seemed increasingly unconvincing with each new incident, each new arrest, each new controversy. And the performance-enhancing drug violations remained the most damaging aspect of Jones's legacy. 4 failed drug tests, 1 for cocaine in 2014 and 3 for performance-enhancing drugs, including clomiphene, letrozole, and turinabol, led to multiple suspensions, the cancellation of fights, the overturning of victories, and being stripped of the light heavyweight title 3 times across his career. Critics argued that these incidents, combined with his brother's own PED suspensions in the NFL, painted a troubling picture of systemic issues within the Jones family. Some fans dismissed him from GOAT discussions entirely due to these consistent failures, arguing that comparing Jones to fighters who competed cleanly, like Georges St-Pierre, Demetrius Johnson, or even current champions who had never failed a drug test, was fundamentally unfair to those who had achieved greatness without chemical assistance. The excuses Jones offered for his positive tests grew increasingly implausible over time. Tainted supplements, contaminated sexual enhancement pills, pulsing metabolites from old violations, each explanation stretched credibility further, and each denial made it harder to believe anything Jones said about his testing history. The scientific community, anti-doping experts, and even some UFC officials expressed deep skepticism about Jones's claims, yet he continued to receive opportunities that other fighters with similar testing histories would never have been granted. To many, Jones's legacy was simply irredeemably tarnished, his accomplishments forever compromised by the methods he used to achieve them and the person he revealed himself to be. This perspective argued that sports are built on fair competition, that rules exist for a reason, and that repeatedly violating those rules while facing minimal consequences, compared to less prominent athletes, represented a fundamental betrayal of what competitive sports should represent. The truth, as it often does, likely resided somewhere between these two extremes. Jones was undeniably talented, perhaps the most naturally gifted mixed martial artist in the sport's history, but that talent was consistently enhanced, compromised, and undermined by his choices, both the performance-enhancing drugs that artificially elevated his abilities and the destructive behaviors that prevented him from fully realizing his true potential. As Jon Jones finally walked away from the sport in 2025, he left behind a legacy that would be debated for generations. Not the clear, unambiguous legacy of dominance and excellence he had once seemed destined to create, but something far more complex, far more tragic. It's the story of a man who had everything, who achieved greatness despite himself, but who could never quite escape the demons that had haunted him from the very beginning. The storm that Jones claimed was behind him had indeed passed, but the wreckage it left in its wake would define how he was remembered far more than the victories, the titles, or the moments of brilliance that had once seemed like they would write his place in history. In the end, Jon Jones's greatest fight was always with himself, and in that fight, despite all his talent, despite all his opportunities, despite all his promises of change, he had lost. The tragedy wasn't just that Jon Jones failed to become the undisputed greatest fighter of all time. The tragedy was that he had the talent to be exactly that, and he threw it away, one poor decision at a time, one failed test at a time, one arrest at a time, until the dream of untarnished greatness became impossible, replaced by the harsh reality of a complicated, compromised, deeply flawed legacy that would forever be defined as much by what he destroyed as by what he achieved. So what do you think about Jon Jones's incredible rise and all the struggles he faced in his life? Click on the cards on your screen to learn even more.